Relationships with ADHD on board can be a little tricky. Everyday chores can pile up. Things can fall through the cracks. Feelings can get hurt. The kids don't know what to think, and sometimes neither do you. But you both know you want that good life back again. The one where you trust each other, where you have fun together, and you remember why you fell in love in the first place. The ADHD Couples Palooza goes straight to the heart of your relationship and offers not only information, strategies, and advice, it brings something far more important. Hope. For your partnership, your family, your happiness. The ADHD Couples Palooza starts now. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the ADHD Couples Palooza. I know you are going to enjoy this session just as you have enjoyed all the sessions. I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I hope that you're watching or listening with your partner, because it's always better to hear this in the same room at the same time so that you can talk about it later. And I forgot to tell you, oh yeah, I'm Linda Roggli. I created the ADHD Couples Palooza because I'm part of an ADHD couple. I know that there have been struggles, maybe not specific to ADHD, but let me tell you, there have been relationship issues for almost all of us, and certainly that's been true in my case as well. That's why I really wanted to bring together a compendium of experts who really know both relationship and ADHD and executive function, which we're going to talk about today, and how to stay safe and without all the shame and blame that often happens in our relationships. Two things I want to mention before I introduce you to Jonathan and Monica. Number one, I just mentioned it, but we'll repeat it. This is an important weekend for a lot of folks. And I do this on the weekend because I know you're still working. You know, I have to go to the grocery store and there's all other things that happen. I'm taking the kids to soccer or whatever it is. But at least you have 24 hours to be able to listen or watch this again and again if you choose to. If you do want to watch it again and again, though, I really can invite you to just go ahead and purchase the Encore package. It's half price this week. It's $97. And that gives you access not just for a year, as some people do. It gives you access forever until the internet dies or I go out of business, whichever comes first. Please also join us for the live event on Sunday afternoon. That's from 12 noon to 2 o'clock. That's Eastern time in the United States. And you're invited to send questions and we will answer those questions during the session. It will also be recorded and be part of the Encore package. And that's about all I have to say about that, because I want you to talk to Jonathan and Monica. Okay, let me tell you who they are. This is Monica Hassel, and she's an ADHD and executive function coach, and she is in Australia. You will hear their beautiful accents in just a few moments. Her coaching journey started in 2012 when she and her husband, Jonathan, who is here today, started ADHD coach training and subsequently, can I say that word, created Connect ADHD Coaching. She presented at the International Conference for ADHD in lots of years, from 2018 to 2021, and she also was at the Australian ADHD Conference in 2019. She talked about the fourth F, fight, flight, freeze, or fib. What a compelling conversation. She also did that in 2022, but perhaps on a different topic. I don't know. Her work has been published in Attitude and Attention magazines, and she runs a live ADHD parenting program, as well as working with adults of all ages with ADHD, of course. She has a goal. And she says that is to curate knowledge, to work closely with her clients, incorporating information and practices from lots of different sources. And some of those sources include neuroscience, of course, we always want that evidence-based, also traditional philosophies and Eastern teachings as well. Mindfulness, always essential for ADHD, and she also adds on top of there with a little salt and pepper, a little coaching practice as well. So welcome, Monica. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. So wonderful to be here.
Yeah. And her husband, as we mentioned earlier, is Jonathan, and he is also an ADHD coach. He also works with executive function, and he's director of Connect ADHD Coaching, which that provides international services based in Brisbane, Australia. How about that? His background includes psychiatric services, and he was a scientific advisor for ADHD in the pharmaceutical industry, so he knows both sides of this, coaching and the medication side as well. He trained as an ADHD coach through the United States, and he offers individual and group programs for people with, you guessed it, ADHD. He's a regular speaker at ADHD meetings in Australia and the United States, and he's a board member of ADDA, and that is near and dear to my heart. ADDA stands for Attention Deficit Disorder Association and works specifically with adults with ADHD. He says his focus is the translation of relevant executive function theory, and we'll talk a little bit about executive function, to facilitate individuals with ADHD to find and embrace their neuronative state, which means we can accept ourselves just who we are, guys. That's what I think that what that means. That supports adaptation and realization of your potential. And we're going to talk about realization of potential in your relationship today. Welcome, both of you. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, so they sent me so many wonderful topics that we could talk about. And I said, can we do all of them? And so they're going to maybe do a little sprinkling of some of those. But one of the things that I was fascinated about was about how does ADHD change both partners, whether both of you have ADHD or whether only one of you has ADHD. So let's jump into that question. How does ADHD change your relationship and change each other, for heaven's sake? Who wants to tackle that first?
I'll take that one. All right. Thank you, darling. So thanks, Linda. So yeah, and look, I should put my hand up straight away. I have ADHD.
Okay.
I didn't realize I had ADHD till I'd supposedly been an expert in the area for 6 years. And it was actually at an international conference in London where I just threw it out there one day at a coffee break that maybe I have ADHD because I just heard the first ever talk on the positives of ADHD. And the experts who were sitting around me all started giggling like schoolgirls and said, "Oh, we thought you knew." And and so that was a reflective journey in a black cab heading out to Heathrow Airport, let me tell you. So and Monica wasn't surprised. So, and Monica obviously has deep understanding about ADHD and she's had it surrounding in her family. So today one of the big things, I do a lot of work with couples. And one of the earliest things I noticed, and noticed in myself too, was that with ADHD, we're often not feeling we're able to be who we want to be. We have the right intention. Well, every intention is right, really. We know what we want to happen. We just don't feel it's going to happen reliably. And we don't trust it, which means often we don't trust that we're going to deliver. And that's a really horrible feeling. And then on top of so that changes how we interact with the world. It can make us, as Monica wrote about in a great article, which I still love reviewing, is that that fourth F, that fib component or fabrication. We'll often sort of talk to the intent, not to the reality of what's going to happen or has happened. The other thing, though, too, is our partner gets pushed, of course, as well. Because if you don't have ADHD, you try and deal with it in a fairly average way, which is, okay, if you're not doing something, and I don't see you as, particularly deficit, then it must be you just need more information. So I'll give you more information. And the person with ADHD will often accept that quite graciously at first because we're used to being told stuff. But then over time, hang on, you did it sort of right that time, but now you're still doing it wrong. Okay, maybe you need more direction. Maybe I need to get more directive. Yes. And so that's when we get into this sort of parenting of partners. But then it gets to a point where the partners suddenly realize, wait a minute, you're able to do it when it's something you're excited about or you're threatened about. You can activate if I raise my voice or if I get upset. So hang on, is this a choice? And that's what it cuts to. And one of the things I always tell couples when if you hear your partner without ADHD getting upset, whether it's shouting, crying, whatever, or threatening, don't think of it as them trying to overpower you. Think of it as they're lost. They're lost and they're trying to get your attention. Because that's what it is. When we resort to emotional responses, it's because we're desperate. We don't know what else to do. So the partner ends up being very different. And when I coach people, that's one of the first questions I ask them is, do you feel like you're being who you want to be? And invariably, they often break down to tears and say, God, no, this is not who I want to be. So if we start from that understanding that there's a shift that needs to happen with both of us. The person with ADHD has the need to regain their intent, so they can feel good, but then also too so they can deliver reliably for their partner. And their partner needs to figure out how they can get back to who they want to be, which is the open and understanding person. And they're only going to get there if we give them the tools to solve the problem that they haven't had access to before. And that way we can start to grow back together as opposed to constantly pushing each other apart.
And farther and farther and farther apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you have articulated that so beautifully in such a succinct way. Thank you so much for capsulizing what happens in ADHD relationships so often. And that the anger that comes up among and between partners is palpable. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's a way out. So, and that's what a lot of us are looking for when we're feeling a little desolate, because is this ever going to change? Can it ever be different? What I'm hearing is that it can be different. So you have several steps on how to get there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit and then I'll throw over to Monica because she's got great elements of this too. So Monica and I do much the same thing in our coaching practice, but this also extends into our personal life. And we're going to tell you a little story about how I'm unable to make a bed. Despite my original training as a nurse.
You used to be.
So, but basically, the idea is that if we want to change, and this is coaching practice, this is standard change models, but we have to think about it in an ADHD term, which puts the emphasis on different parts a bit more than you would normally do or on average do. So the first thing is we have to be aware. So we have to understand that yes, there's a problem, which I can hear it out there going, yes, of course we know there's a problem. Why do you think we're here? But we've got to have an awareness of each other's experience of that problem. And this is, the first barrier. We've got to learn to listen to each other again. And that's about, we have a little tool we use, which is an extension of the talking stick idea, where we extend it to the speaker has the responsibility of continuing to adapt what they're saying until they feel understood. Oh, wow. The listener has the responsibility of not bringing any of their own agenda, even if it's about what they did wrong. But, and that was a tough lesson for me. But they've got the responsibility of coming and just being entirely about making the speaker feel understood. Got it. So they ask good active listening, probing questions, summarizing, paraphrasing, clarifying. But never bring any of their own stuff into it until they can feel like they're standing beside their partner. And the analogy I use, and probably because I live in Australia and people get lost in the bush. We call it the bush here. I think you call it the forest. That if you're rescuing someone in the bush and you can hear each other, you never tell them to come to you. You get them to stand still and then you go to join them. And when you're with them, then you can see where they are, see what risks are or what misunderstandings are around them and help guide them out.
Oh, I love that analogy. Thank you so much for that. It's such a wonderful visual, and to hook that into, especially if you're the ADHD partner, to fully listen. I'm a speaking circles trained facilitator, and that's about actually being fully present in your own body as well as listening to that other person without having that I've got something to say, I'm making it up, I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say to what you're saying. What you're saying is I'm going to be that active listening, and I love the fact that you said that. So wonderful. That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. And here's a little pause exercise for the audience.
Okay.
Hit pause for a second in a minute and turn and ask your partner genuinely, do you feel heard? And it'd be interesting to hear what each of you say to each other, and I would pay attention to it. So we're going to get aware. Then we've got to understand this, and this is a really big ADHD part too. Is that as Monica mentioned earlier, we're both very vested in executive function, we need to use that mechanism, that wonderful tool, to help us understand. Well, what is the mechanism of all this stuff that's happening? Because when we understand that, we will be presented with the solution. There's nothing magical about it. It's just understanding how the thing is working. So, Mon, did you want to talk to that for a second?
Well, just it's interesting. I was coaching a couple yesterday, and we were talking about the awareness. It was a later diagnosis, as often happens. And when it's a new awareness, all of a sudden, context change. But this young fellow said, it's with this awareness, it's finding out you've been doing things the hard way all of your life. And I thought that was really interesting, is finding out you're doing everything the hard way. So... And it's very real. He's quite emotional. That was a big
I can
impact for
imagine.
him.
We make things so complicated, don't we?
Mm.
And it's partly because we need to engage ourselves in it. But you're right. We're kind of going around to, the pretzel kind of thing.
Yeah. And we sort of sling around the term executive function as coaches and ADHD coaches particularly. We sling it around like it's this easy peasy thing. But I want to let everyone out there know, I was the scientific advisor for a large drug company, and I had a drug that wasn't a stimulant. And it was the first one, and it was Strattera. And we were trying to understand it. And so to do that, executive function seemed to be this wonderful way into understanding it. And this is 15, 20 years ago. And I remember I absorbed everything Barkley and Brown wrote. I'm a bit of a Russell Barkley fanboy, I must admit. It's a bit tragic. But because he's brilliant. And I love the way he prose it. And Brown's work's fantastic too. But it took me 18 months of meeting up with a wonderful psychiatrist here as colleagues and talking about what is this executive function thing. We met for 18 months, probably about every 4 or 5 weeks for lunch. We would read in between, debate it, try and tie it into the neuroscience. So my message is executive function doesn't need to be as complicated as I made it, but don't be hard on yourself if it's, hang on, we're throwing this term around, but what does it really mean? And Monica, you really talked to this beautifully in terms of breaking it down. How would you describe it?
Well, as you said, we really like the work of Russell Barkley, and I've got a volcano model that I speak to when we talk about the behaviors. Underneath that's the diagnosis. Under that is executive function, and under that is the brain chemistry. So the brain chemistry impacts executive functions, which impacts behavior. So if we can all be on the same page, but what's really underlying the behaviors? As John said before, there's often good intent, but what's happening underneath isn't where we'd like it to be. So when I'm talking about executive function, I'm talking about Barkley talks about 7, but we break it into 4 areas so people can understand it a bit better, which is, self-awareness and attention, and then working memory and planning. And that does seem to be the one that a lot of couples, run into trouble with. They forgot to do this. I can't trust them to do that they'll forget. It's the inhibition part, the not doing things or saying things that get you into trouble. And then it's also the emotions and the motivation. And that's another area, that we spent a lot of time talking about emotions and motivation. So as Barkley would say, to look at ADHD as just being impulsive or hyperactive or it's easily distracted is to trivialize ADHD. We have to all be on the same page of those executive functions.
And particularly within relationships, the emotional stuff. I mean, I think there is so much misinterpretation about emotions if you have ADHD, because we grow up trying to guess what's going on. And there's a wonderful book came out in 2017 by a researcher in the States, Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she's a psychologist who's been studying emotions for 20 odd years. You can find her on TED Talks. But her book is called How Emotions Are Made. And she talks about levels of emotion. And if you look at it, she doesn't talk specifically to executive function, but it fits perfectly. And so what she's talking about is there's, my summary of this is that, and the way I approach it is that emotions are really they're the warning lights on your dashboard of your car. Now, I drive a Jeep, so I love you Americans for inventing the Jeep. However, there are some quality issues, which I embrace because I love my Jeep. But my engine warning light has been on for probably 2 years.
Oh, no.
And then it'll turn on and off incrementally, whether it's Tuesday or maybe it rained or maybe...
You mean inconsistently? Oh, my God.
Totally. It is I never thought of that, Linda. It's an ADHD vehicle. It's beautiful, it's exciting, and yet it's very inconsistent.
Can go anywhere.
Yeah, go anywhere. That's true. You can take the top off. So if we think about emotions like that they're warning lights. They're not necessarily what's really happening. Because what happens is that first level is we get triggered by something. And this is going to be important for what we're going to talk about in a minute. We get triggered by something, which is what we're meant to do. We're meant to then do association level, which is really quick and really dirty and fast, but it's fast. That's the key. So it's based on all our past experiences all bundled up, and I can hear all of these partners going, oh, that's why I become a great historian whenever we have an issue. I start quoting every historic event. But So that's what it's meant to happen. It's meant to try and help us predict what's coming next, which is a really powerful thing to be able to do. However, then it's meant to downregulate. So now we're into brain regions. We're talking about default mode turning down and turning up task positive, which is your attention. And that's when your attention turns on, it turns down your emotions so you can pay attention to the detail. Like what is actually happening now? Then the second layer of emotion, which when I say this to my clients, most people go, I didn't even know that existed, is when we choose the emotion we're going to have going forwards. Because then it becomes this lovely shorthand to remind us or stimulate us into action. So if I want to motivate myself, I'm not going to do the classic ADHD thing of waiting till I really like something or till something really threatens me. I'm going to imagine it happening and seeing it happen in process, resources, and in the context of my life as a workable thing. Then I get this lovely, sustainable, low-level emotion that says, yeah, it's just right. It's, as one of my clients said so beautifully, it's doable.
Yeah.
That's the feeling we should be looking for. So if we need to really understand, particularly in couples, that this triggering element and this reactive element, well, look, ADHD, that's sort of our calling card. Like with ADHD, I often say, I think we spend most of our times in the default mode network being emotional, even when we think we're not. Right?
I've got something to add to, and I've got something to add to that as well. Let's talk around emotions. I like to talk, help people understand that, often with the emotions or motivation, it's often the right emotion, but the wrong volume control. And that's why understanding self-regulation comes in. The ability to self-regulate that emotion is challenging because of the fueling. So whereas, someone might feel, despondent because they lost another job or was running late or missed friends or even anxious about it, that emotion is right, but the volume is wrong, which is different to anxiety disorder or depression. They're different. So this is where we need to delineate, this anxiousness or despondency that comes with ADHD, or could be the reacting to a situation, the volume might be too high. Sometimes the talking is too much or the level, the volume is too high as well. And it all comes down to that self-regulation, which John's talking about, the attention.
Which dramatically impacts your partner who may not have ADHD. So if the volume's really, then they're hearing it in a very different way than if you're at that down-regulated place. So what I'm hearing is that from what Jonathan said and what you said, it sounds like we need to be conscious of this. It sounds like that we become more aware of what's going on and then are able to, God, I hate to use the word control, but I'm going to use something similar. So
this is where mindfulness is so important.
Exactly.
Being mindful of the situation.
Great.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Linda. One of my clients said to me, "Oh, I thought emotions were like the weather. You woke up, that's what was happening, and you had to deal with it." And so, absolutely. So it's about directing emotion. It's about understanding that we're meant to be directing it and we're being reactive. And I love how Monica talks about that volume level, because that volume level isn't always just about being upset about something for our partners. It can also be when we're enthusiastic, because it can sound like that Monica's hearing that I'm committing to building a space shuttle in the backyard. And while I may be entertaining the idea, I'm not actually committing to it. And so that can be both scary commitments, but also commitments like, hey, let's go on a picnic. And I can say, we could go to the beach and we could blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And Monica can be in her mind booking out, okay, we're going on a picnic, and then comes back, oh no, we're not going on a picnic. We're just talking about it, right?
Got it.
So, I had a CEO of a company who, it was one of these startups, computer companies, and he said that people kept going off track on tasks, and I said, are you talking to them in the elevator? And he went, yeah. I said, what do you talk about? I talk about whatever I'm thinking about right now, and they're all developmental things. And so his people are hearing, go and do this task. So that's that volume thing is a really important thing. So if we understand what's going on, and let's stay with that emotional idea for a second.
Okay.
So we know there's that triggering element, which leads us into fights, as I said, history quoting and all the rest of it, but rarely solves a problem. And we become who we don't want to be. So the partner without ADHD becomes, they feel like they're having to be demanding, or they're having to be emotional or directive, and they feel horrible for that. And then, everyone out there with ADHD, give your partner a hug, because they feel horrible when they do that. They are not dominating us. Okay, that's what we really need to understand. The other side of it too, the person with ADHD can become avoidant. Well, no, let's not talk about it because that will trip off this thing. So if I haven't made the bed, and we should probably tell our bedtime story, Moni. If you haven't made the bed, then if you come to me and say, firstly, Moni's wondering, how do I say it to him? So quick backstory so we can reference it. Monica and I both originally met as nurses, so she knows I know how to make a bed, which is sort of unfortunate. Monica is very good at making beds and being tidy in the morning. I am not. I sort of tend to stumble out of bed, and lo and behold, I figured out with ADHD, it takes me a little bit to jumpstart my head. Yeah. So usually a coffee and a shower. So Monica asked me to make the bed because she gets up early and exercises because she's good and going to live a lot longer than me. And I kept resisting doing it because I hate making the bed, and also I hate how it's tucked in and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, we had this little stash, and it wasn't particular. And this is probably a good point. It doesn't have to be particularly nasty or intense. It was just this running stash we had. It was this one little, it was a burr in our side that was always there. Now, there have been things that have been intense for us, but this wasn't particularly, but it was always there. Mm-hmm. And one day we decided to listen to each other. Ooh. And I said to her, out of frustration more than anything else, why is this so important to you? We don't spend any time in the bedroom all day. We're always out work and doing things. Come home, we go to bed and we mess it up anyway. Why does it matter? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, oh, she likes, neat sheets or something. I don't know what my head was thinking. And Monica said, well, darling, I worked, Monica was in pharma at that time too, and said, I need to lay my clothes out somewhere so I can see what I'm going to wear for the day. Because being a guy, I just sort of walk into the closet and walk out with whatever stuck to me. But Monica, I'm sure there's other men who are not like that. But Monica obviously put some thought into, because that's why she looks so beautiful all the time. And as soon as she said that, it clicked. Because I was thinking, what would that be like? And I thought, when I'm making something or building something or even figuring out some literature or something, I like to lay everything out so I can see it. And I thought, And then Monica asked me about what my barrier with it was.
Yeah.
And do you want me to keep telling, Monica?
Oh, you can take it then.
All right. So, so my barrier was I hate making beds, but also too, I don't like it all tucked in anyway. And so we compromised, and I said, well, to give you your working surface, what if I pulled up the sheets and the doona so that it's flat and neat looking, but I'm not tucking anything in? And she said, yeah, that's perfect. That works for her.
Wow. So simple. And yet.
Exactly.
Burr on the side for so long. It's like,
yeah. But then Monica did something that was extra clever.
What was that?
Well, she used that emotional reactivity in her favor, quite not manipulatively at all, I'm sure. But every now and then, she still does this years later. Every now and then she'll just come up and give me a peck on the cheek, or she'll just acknowledge me and say, hey, thank you for making the bed. It looks lovely.
Nice.
Now, that one little bit of feedback means that I will make that bed beautifully for the rest of the week.
Absolutely.
It actually heightens my awareness of it. She hasn't demanded it. She hasn't asked for it, but that acknowledgement means so much. And, just as a takeaway, couples, the people without ADHD, don't be afraid to use that. You're not giving in. You're not surrendering. You're not praising for what someone should just be able to do. What you're doing is you're manipulating an existing state that we will respond so well to positive feedback. You don't have to go gushy. You don't have to buy me flowers and chocolates, although chocolates would be nice, lady.
Monica, just so you know, that was a hint.
Just so you're aware, Christmas is around.
I would eat them all before I gave them to him anyway.
If we could get them away from our daughters. But that little bit of incentive is powerful. Okay, which leads on to the next bit, which is really about acceptance.
Okay.
So that's huge with ADHD. So we have to be able to accept what is ADHD, what effect it's having on the world around us, but also what we can change or what we need to accommodate. And that will vary from moment to moment. And it varies, as Moni says, you base it off executive function. You start with attention, emotion, and working memory and impulse control. Moni and I have a running debate about impulse control, but I'm going to cede to you this time, honey.
Okay.
And if you start with those markers and say, well, okay, is there an attentional problem here, which there usually is. So what can I do about that? do I manage my environment to accommodate my attention problems, or do I try and boost my attention, through good sleep, exercise, all the you want to talk about the internal pharmacy stuff, Mon?
Actually, last year at the international conference, I spoke about the notion of the inner pharmacy. So the external pharmacy can be really important to many people, the medications they're prescribed, but we also have a responsibility for our internal pharmacy, our own body and brain chemistry that helps, with everyday things, helps medications work better. So, So, and sleep being the number 2 on the list, apart from nutrition and hydration, that's sleep, which we know is notoriously difficult for many people with ADHD. It's just simple things that often don't cost anything that can help their own body and brain chemistry.
Which can be difficult, though. I mean, that's difficult for both partners. If the ADHD partner is not coming to bed until 3 or 4 hours after my husband, for instance, I interrupted myself, which is my ADHD. But my husband would go to bed at 10 o'clock because he has to be in bed at 10 o'clock. Absolutely going to do it. And I'm down watching TV or I'm down working. I'll be up in 15 minutes. And he goes, and he just goes right to bed.
Yeah.
So it does affect both partners. So tell me, I want to bring this back to executive function, Monica, because I want to make sure, because as you say, executive function is tossed around a lot. And I want to bring this back to, is this acceptance of my ADHD and therefore it's my responsibility to deal with it? Or are we talking about acceptance on both parts, and how does executive function fit into there?
I think the acceptance is understanding there is a diagnosis of ADHD means inconsistent fueling. And then the importance of understanding executive function, that gives us the ability to notice which executive functions are working well and which need some support, and knowing the structures to put in place to improve that executive function. So a good example, Linda, is what you just said. You said to your husband, I'll be up in 15 minutes, but you said it might be 3 or 4 hours later. That comes down to that executive function of, working memory and planning. Yeah. So a good, a simple example of that is to have we suggest people that we work with have an app on their phone that tells them what time it is every 15 minutes. It just says what time it is. Yeah. So that helps with that managing of time and time awareness. It's that awareness. Yeah. And while you might intend to go to bed in 15 minutes, it's not really what happens. So time management, is one of those, abstract concepts of people with ADHD, not intentional, but it's what happens. So that's where executive function, we might support, as Barclay really beautifully says, he talks about engineering the environment. So engineering the environment to support executive functions, hearing what time it is, maybe setting an alarm for bedtime, things like that, having a clearer intention. So that's where, I would say, and then the motivation for you is quite low because you're really engaged in something else. You're getting dopamine from what you're doing that.
Of course.
So it's harder than to shift your attention. It comes back to attention again. Absolutely. All of those executive functions work together.
Well, I just want to be clear, though, that executive function is not the exclusive purvey of ADHD folks.
Everyone has executive functions.
ADHD partner has an executive function situation as well. And we pretend that their executive function works beautifully and ours is defective or deficient. And that's not always the case either. So there can be both things going on. And I'm not talking about a mix. I'm not talking about 2 ADHD folks. I'm talking about a non-ADHD brain with an ADHD brain. And I think we talked just a minute before we were on camera about the fact that my husband thinks ADHD is contagious, even though I would say that he's actually more like OCD. But can you talk for just a minute about how our executive functions meld and how we can understand each other and say, yeah, I understand that you can remember to go to bed at 10 o'clock and I can't. How do we talk about that? This is something I really love to hear, never heard talked about.
Yeah, well, I guess it's the way of engaging in that conversation, and it might be, no one wants to sound judgy. And I think the important thing is to be objective and non-judgmental, which is what mindfulness gives us. Being objective, non-judgmental, and that gives you choice. And it might be one of the partners, whatever it is, I might say, I'm just noticing that you're not getting to bed on time, or I'm just noticing that you wanted to do this. Tell me more. Okay, John?
Yeah, I think we can go a layer deeper than that, and I think, and this is where, and maybe this is just from the scientific background that I come from, but is I want to get back down to, well, hang on, how does that all happen? They're great interventions, but I think about, well, okay, let's start with, everyone has executive function.
Mm-hmm.
We all have variable executive function, but with ADHD, it's super variable. And we know there's good arguments for that in terms of neurochemistry, what's going on there. There's some pretty robust arguments for that. Mm-hmm. However, we know everyone's executive function is going to be impacted by fatigue, by how hungry we are. The whole hangry thing, which advertising's picked up. All that sort of stuff. Also about whether we've moved recently. So basically all the physiology stuff Moni was talking about. Yeah. So, but then I think we need to ask ourselves, well, hang on, why is my partner not struggling with the level of inconsistencies I am? Yeah. And the difference that I see is that the partner without ADHD with a much more consistent executive function, which means that when they do something, they get sort of fairly reliable results. They stay up late, their executive function suffers, and they go, oh, I stayed up late. That's what happened. Most of the time, I don't stay up late. And that's how they figure it out. Now, with ADHD, we don't have that consistency. We don't, because we could stay up late and still struggle. We could, not struggle. We could go to bed early, and occasionally we still struggle because there's something else impacting it, right? Because we float closer to the line. So, because we think we're recycling dopamine too effectively in that part of our brain. So if we start with, hang on, how do you do it? Don't tell me what I should do. Tell me what you do. And you'll find that your partners have systems. So how do I make sure that I eat properly? Well, I check in and self-awareness. I pay attention that if I've been eating heavy meals over Christmas, I think, maybe I better get on the salads before New Year's, right? Because I feel a bit sludgy and I'm paying attention to myself. People with ADHD don't do that. That's why when we use that, whether it's 15 minutes or half-hourly check-ins, which we call strategic mindfulness, it's about actually becoming aware, self-aware, and aware of your environment. How do you manage time? Well, I use alarms, or I use this thing called a calendar, which is really cool. Because it's sort of like a time map. You can see time and you can start to manipulate time. Oh, and guess what? Because I hold myself accountable for my time management and I've got a tool that helps me do it, I can now practice time. So if I'm late today, I might stop and check and say, well, hang on, that's not good enough that I was late. For me, I'm not happy I was late. So I'm going to figure out how to fix that for next time. And I'm going to create that solution. And then we come back to attention. So I should always be thinking, how's my attention going to be helped by that? So let's say, for example, I figured out how not to be late next time. My attention, I need to bring it to my attention before the next thing I do. So maybe in my diary, calendar, I'll jump in and I'll create a little note saying, hey, leave half an hour earlier, or don't forget to count for travel time and parking, or whatever, right? Yeah. We've got to think about our emotions. So we've got to stop to direct emotion, take that trigger, use our attention and say, well, hang on, how do I want to feel about that? Wow. What's going to be most useful to me? And, this is a great segue into talking about, when I said both partners are pushed into who they don't want to be. And the little tool that I like to use with couples is, and something I've recently labeled the safety bubble, but it's basically the idea of recognizing, so we're aware we're both emotionally triggered about this thing. We're aware that we both want it to be different, but we're feeling it's not able to do it. And we're aware that one's becoming usually more demanding and feels they have to get upset to get attention. The other one is avoidant and hiding about it and doesn't want to talk about it, which means we're never going to solve it. So what about if we said, hey, just like Monica and I, that bed, and even though it was a small one, but if we said, hey, let's stop triggering each other for a second. What if we agree not to be triggered, both of us, and we make it something we can talk about collaboratively? Because then our partners know, while ADHD is our responsibility and we're going to own it and we're going to win it and we're going to be fantastic. Like, the reason I love ADHD, which is a weird thing to say, but I love it because of the potential. It is usually very dysfunctional when I first meet people, but my promise to them is that you can be anything you want to be, and most of all, you can be reliable with ADHD.
Wow. Now, can you say that again, please?
You can be anything you want to be, including reliable.
Congratulations. I just have to, I can hear people out there with a little sigh of relief and looking at each other like, really? That could happen? That's amazing. And even for me to hear that is amazing too. I just jotted a couple of things down. When you talk about interrupting that, setting that every 15 minutes, and you also talk about mindfulness. I want to remind people that mindfulness is simply being present. So when I'm in my bubble, not the kind of bubble you're talking about, but when I'm in my hyper focus and I am so engrossed in this and something pulls me out of it, that pulls me back to that moment. That's all it means to be mindful. That's it. So it doesn't mean you have to meditate. It doesn't mean any of that kind of stuff. It just means waking back up to the moment. And then the other thing that I asked that I was thinking was, and that's what I was actually going to say, was when you have a conversation, just as the two of you did about making the bed, what I hear is that you got curious about it and you ask questions instead of assuming, making some assumptions that you're holding back. And it can be kind of seething, as you say, the burr under the saddle kind of thing. But if you can ask questions, and the questions are not, why are you doing this? Because that implies wrong, right?
Yeah. It's always what question is always better. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about that is important to you?
Exactly.
And the thing important to me was like, I like a flat surface. I like to walk into a room. It looks tidy if the bed's made, just two simple things.
Yeah. And it's that great moment of awareness you get if you stop and just assume for a minute, just imagine, just take on board. Maybe what if it's not a moral deficit on behalf of your partner? Yeah. What if it's something functional they struggle with? I had a lovely couple of coaching very recently. And if you're out there and you know it's you, say hi. But is that they were talking about keeping the house clean, and it was a real problem for the wife who doesn't have ADHD. She was getting really fatigued with it. And the husband, was working from home and not doing it. And we were in the coaching session, we paused to check in and we really explored her experience of it. Then I said to him, what's your experience of it? Let's understand you. And he said, I would love the house to be tidy. And this is another big misnomer. With ADHD, most people with ADHD love an uncluttered environment. Because it's so much better on our heads. If you want to see an ADHD person wake up happier, unclutter the bedroom, right? And be really nice to them. That always helps. But he said that, and his wife looked at him like almost in shock and said, "What?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I hate it being messy." He said, "I just don't believe I can successfully make it not messy."
Yeah.
And then it came down to a whole discussion about meeting her expectations, where he felt he needed, and it opened up this whole beautiful conversation. And I got to say, I thought he was incredibly brave to be able to go there because he had been protective, but also too, she was gorgeous in the way that she was so quick to accept. And these little moments of change, I mean, this is what I love about coaching, these little self-awareness, whether it's for the person with ADHD or the partner, but they can make seismic shifts. These little moments of awareness, like my little moment of awareness of Monica, what she wanted the bed made for, was like a seismic shift for me. But it was also what it meant to her. Now, and our partners without ADHD are pretty good at adapting. Where we might not always be good at it, but they are very good at it. So the moment they feel there's a hope, there's a way forwards, they go, "Oh, okay, I'm on board with that. Let's do it." They might not trust it straight away, but they will adapt really quickly. So that's what we look for in the promise of that.
Wow, I love that. Monica, what do you have to add to that? I'm so in awe of you guys. So of you all.
I think John's pretty much said it beautifully, but I guess the main thing is just coming back to the understanding and the intent. And Barclay talks about ADHD being attention deficit disorder. It's not that they don't have good intentions; that they're not clear. Not being able to know, how do I get the place tidy? I don't know how to do that. So, it's about ADHD not about not knowing what to do. It's not doing what you know. You want the place tidy, but then you don't know how to do it. And it's, from my perspective, the way we connect knowing and doing is the resources: medication, diet, sleep, exercise. Knowing the executive functions well and knowing where to put the support in place. And that third level that I think, of connecting knowing to doing is being mindful. And that you had a really great example of what mindfulness and I wanted to add to that. I talk about mindfulness as bringing your attention to the current moment in a meaningful way. It's not being hyper focusing on something, but it's bringing your attention in the right now moment with a bit of context.
Yeah.
So if we can connect knowing and doing with those elements, it makes life easier. It clarifies the intention.
And I think we should add too, I believe that's one of those intuitive systems that people without ADHD learn. So the average focused attention is about 20 to 30 minutes. We know that, right? So, and then when it fails, we need to pay attention to what people do. When it fails, people will allow themselves to lose attention instead of us desperately trying to hang on to it. Yeah. And they allow themselves to move. They breathe. Usually their bodies interrupt them because their body wants to move and cough and breathe and all the rest of it. Then they do something interesting. They check out the room. They do wherever they are. They check out their environment. They check in on themselves. How am I doing? Am I okay? Am I good? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? And then they remind themselves of what I'm here for. Okay, so I'm in this lecture. That's right. I've got to listen to this guy so I can pass this exam. Or no, that's right. My partner's talking to me, and that's pretty important. So, and that sort of thing. So they do that, and they do it so intuitively and so quickly that it only takes a few seconds. And that's what Monica and I, Monica bravely took me to a full day of mindfulness at a Buddhist retreat near us here in Australia, which is fantastic. Beautiful place called Chenrezig. And I lasted, oh my goodness, the 40 minutes back to back all day with no speaking. So I was in trouble. Wow. And I thought it was lectures. I thought it was going to be lectures.
But it was actually practice. Okay.
It was practice, yeah. And so the first session I really struggled. And then the second one, I actually spent my time going to my head thinking, what do I know about neuroscience? Why is this so hard for me? What's going on with ADHD? What's the benefit? Why would people do it? And that's how we arrived at what we call strategic mindfulness. So we're actively giving people with ADHD that system of checking in every half hour, and it takes a few seconds in your head. And Monica came up with a great acronym called WIN, W-I-N, which is what am I doing? How am I doing? Is it what I intended for the I? And then N, now what next?
I love that.
Choosing what next was a novel idea for me.
No kidding. Well, I mean, then it feels like that we aren't just chaotic. We aren't just out of control. We are feeling like, I think a lot of us, at least I'm speaking for myself and a lot of my clients, feel like let's go back to your example of the house, Monica, about feeling like the house is out of control and I don't know how to do it. I may know how to put things away, but it feels so overwhelming and therefore I feel out of control. I'm even physically moving back as I say that. So you probably can't hear me anymore, but that piece of now what, as I make a choice for that, that's huge. And sometimes we don't know now what, and that's okay too, right? Because sometimes we might need at that point, we may need that information that we got inundated with before.
I had some conversations last week, particularly with a lot of my clients were talking about, it was funny on the same day, talking about feeling that they were afloat and they were drifting. And then we would then have the conversation about, well, mindfulness can be your anchor. But rather than feeling afloat, then bringing your attention to the current moment in a meaningful way. Such a simple thing.
And then to tie that back into that emotional reactivity and like Monica was talking about the volume of emotions being out of whack. And I was talking about that reliance on reactive emotion. Now, what you're describing is when I've got to sort out their house, it's usually because someone's cross with us because their house is really messy.
Yeah.
And so we wait until the external environment demands our attention. And they usually are upset when they demand our attention. So now, which means before we even start, we're overwhelmed. Exactly. We've got this wall of bad things happening and we got to fix it. And now in emergencies, people with ADHD are fantastic. I always say, if I was in a burning building, I'm going to go with the ADHD crew because we're going to get out of there. We'll probably make a rudimentary hang glider, but it may not work, but we will get out of there. Now, at least we'll be busy until we get out of there. So, but when we get hit by that wall of stuff, now everyone I coach, I always start by saying, the answers, you just can't access them
right
when you need them in the moment. Just like, with people who have ASD will struggle to access the emotional interpretation and processing in the moment. We struggle to access our attention in the moment, and our attention allows us to break things down, use our working memory, direct our emotions as to what we want to prioritize and focus on and how we're going to feel about it. And often when I work with people, they can come in presenting as quite depressed. But, after an hour of working with them and me being their executive function for the hour, they suddenly feel great and hopeful. And I know what to do now. I can do that and I can do that. So I think it's that element too of waiting till the external environment, like being externally driven, basically. Absolutely. So if we start internalizing that, which is what we're talking about with this couple stuff, if we stop reacting, and this is both of us, right? Because as Linda pointed out beautifully, we both have executive function. Both of us at that point are not doing too well with it. Right. So if we come and say, hey, let's agree to understand it first. Because we're having different problems with it.
And that's when we get to the next stage of experimenting then, isn't it? Then we experiment with solutions, which is the next step.
Yeah, because if we are aware of it, if we understand the mechanism behind it, then if we accept it, then we got to say, well, okay, we've got to change it. Now, guess what? Most people with ADHD think, myself included, that just because I understand it, and I'm so very clever, that it should fix itself, right? I get it. I understand it. Yeah. Right? But as Monica said, what did you say before, Mon?
ADHD isn't a matter of knowing what to do, but doing what you know.
Exactly.
Which is what Barclay said. I'm just parroting Barclay. Yeah.
And absolutely. Doing something different by its very definition is going to require a little bit more effort. Absolutely. It's going to feel a little clunky. Even the stopping and listening is going to feel clunky if you don't usually do it, right?
Absolutely. And so tie this back to your bed making. So how was it for you when you started making the bed? Did it feel
right? So if we tied it back, so now I'm on board, right? So the next morning I made the bed, which was fantastic. I was a genius, wasn't I, darling? You were so impressed.
Fabulous. I loved it.
So it's impressed but suspicious. But So first off, I wanted to build the reliability. So the first thing I had to do was, I don't have to wait till I've done it right for a year. I can actually tell Monica, I've got a plan. I know how I'm going to do this. And the plan helps reinforce the likelihood of reliability. So Moni can start to relax a bit and start to trust before I've even done anything. So what I said to Moni was, okay, because guess what? We both know about executive function. I said, my attention is the problem. When I wake up in the morning, I stagger around. I don't think about anything else until I fall into the shower. So I've got to make sure you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what you do. I'm going to get dressed at the bedside. So I threw up my clothes on the bed before I went into the shower, came back out, I got dressed, and the bed's right in front of me. So that's how I brought my attention into the right place at the right time.
Got it.
Okay. Perfect. The second thing I did was I knew I needed to support my motivation. So I asked Moni, can you tell me what it's like to come in and find the bedmate? And you know what? Because she's so beautiful, I didn't really need to ask her. She straight away came and said, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Good.
And then I did one other thing. I made myself stop and become, as Moni said, aware in terms of being mindful. I actually stopped and thought, yeah, that wasn't hard. That was pretty easy. I just had to remember to do it. And then that merged into, because I forgot to do it some mornings. Occasionally I'm oppositional too, I should add, and just choose not to.
I'm shocked.
So, which to that point, everyone who is married to someone with ADHD or in a partnership with someone with ADHD, please allow them an oppositional moment every now and then. Like I have what I call my oppositional evenings, where Moni will come and say, hey, honey, I can see you're really into that, but remember, you want to be in bed by 10:30. And I'll say, not tonight. Tonight I'm going rogue. And she's fine. She goes, okay. Because the deal is, that is going to have an impact on me. The next day I'm going to be tired. I'm probably going to be grumpy. But I don't get to give that to anyone else. That's mine to carry. So I can choose what I want to do, but I carry the consequences of it. No one else.
So how is that for you, Monica, when he says, are you just like, okay, the logical consequences are all yours. I'm just going to leave it alone?
As a partner of someone with ADHD, all I want to do is, provide the structure that's there and like just a reminding, might forgetting that it's, 10:30 at night or what intentions were, but, he's an adult too, and he's a fantastic adult, he's got an amazing brain, so he can make that choice. I'm just going to remind him, and I don't take any judgment from it. Just that's about being on the same page, you know.
And that's what I love about it too, honey, is that you don't have to own it. And for partners with ADHD, of people with ADHD, you can feel like I have to own it. I have to direct this. I have to fix this. The big solution, one of the big solutions of this is give the ownership to the person with ADHD, but make it absolutely clear. I'm here as a supporter. I'm here to be aware. I'm an interested observer. I'm going to tell you if I see stuff going off the rails. You tell me how you want me to tell you. So it's not me nagging you, and I'm not searching for words. Like, hey, honey, like Moni might say, hey, like I said, she comes in and says, didn't you intend to be in bed at 10:30? Or well, just reminding you it's 10:30, because she knows and I'm fine with that. But then she walks away. Then she says, okay, you do what you're going to do, and she knows I have to own it. And for everyone out there with
it, so give me the other side of that. As opposed to, what would a unhelpful comment by Monica, what would that be for you?
Oh, if Monica came and said, no, came and really pursued it. No, you said you're going to go to bed. You know you're going to be awful in the morning if you don't do this. La, 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 la. In which case, I'm just digging my heels in.
Completely averse having a trigger. I think it's really important when people are having conversations that they know how to have the conversation. So there can be certain ways that someone is trying to alert their attention to something, but for the person, say, for example, the ADHD person, it feels very threatening. So people go into fight, flight, or freeze. Either going to fight it, have an argument about it, which is a trigger, or flight, which is ignore it or shut down.
And let's not forget, for the partners though too, those poor people are standing there knowing they're going to have a fight. So they're struggling to think of, how can I raise this because I love you and I want you to be happy and healthy. I don't want us to have a fight tomorrow morning. So how can I raise this? What can I say and not get my head bitten off? Exactly. So I think as a guy with ADHD particularly, I have become acutely aware of my impact on my partner. Now, I don't carry shame about that anymore. I think we need to work on that, everyone. That's the acceptance piece. But I am acutely empathetic for the impact I have on my partner, because she is my emotional tether to the planet. With ADHD, and I think there's a big RSD element when we talk about RSD. I think a lot of people have a think about it's emotional regulation, but it's also usually about where we lose that reliable emotional connection. And Monica, because she's an angel, and for better or for worse, she accepts me who I am. She acknowledges me. She calls me out when I'm being who I don't want to be.
Got it.
But then she walks away and she leaves it with me, and she asks me, how can I tell you about that? How can I alert you? And my job is to acknowledge it is my responsibility. So if I wake up the next morning and I'm tired going upstairs, I chose this. So, and if I choose it, that means I'm now empowered not to choose it. So I'm going to wear the pain. I'm going to wear the discomfort. I know I'm not as sparkling as I think I am in my head, but I'm not going to impact it on anyone. But I tell you what, that night, and that was probably the biggest thing when I took full ownership of the experience and refused to give it to anyone else. Then, no, Moni will tell you, some nights I'll just go like at 8:30. I'm going to bed. I'm really tired. I just need to go to bed. And that awareness sort of comes back, and again, it's like estimating time. When you create these boundaries that help you push back on yourself, it helps you learn and change.
But I just want to say to that non-ADHD partner though, because what Monica said was, you're intended to go to bed at 10:30, and he said, no, I'm not tonight. Monica, I bet you anything, did not go, okay. It wasn't like you're gonna be sorry. There was no judgment. Am I right about that, Monica?
No judgment. He's a highly intelligent man, and that's often his creative time. He's very creative, huge, amazing brain. So that's his moment. So, but he owns it the next day. So but it is. I think the point is to finding out what if I do need to communicate something, what is the best way for me to do it? So exactly.
And we're still practicing that, right? We're still working through that, And
that's what I was going to say, because one of the last things, and I know we're running out of time here, but one of the things I want to get to is one of the things you mentioned to me before we got started was we can put these systems in place. And that's why I wanted to bring you back to making the bed, because you said, I didn't do it sometimes. So sometimes the system broke down, but it didn't break down completely because there was something about adaptability, about fine tuning this. Can you talk about that just for a minute at the very end?
Yeah. So if we start by anticipating that every experiment will fail at some point, and I know that's the big F word for everyone out there, but it's only feels horrible because we felt disempowered by it because we didn't have the solutions. Here's the solution. You, like I think you said earlier, Linda, you rinse and repeat. You go back and say, first I've got to be aware. Okay, so I've got to be able to pay attention. Am I doing it every day? So create strong boundaries. So my measure was, did I make that bed every single day? It couldn't be generally okay. No, I created, and this was mine, not Monica's. So I had to make it every day because that way I can notice easily if I didn't. So that's the awareness part. The second bit is understanding, well, what got in the way? Well, like I said earlier, it will never be a moral deficit on your part. You are not broken. You are not bad. As Monica said, what got in the way? Yeah. And it might be something I did, but it wasn't with the intent of breaking the plan. So if I can actually look at that, and this is where our partners are so cool too, because we can go and talk to them. If we can verbally process, even if they don't say anything, usually that helps us figure it out because we're verbal processors. But they may have noticed something we didn't notice. So if we're now working as a team, I've got another set of eyes who can maybe give me some insight. And then I have to create the new experiment. I accept whatever I need to accept now. Like, oh yeah, if I go to bed late, I'm really going to have to remind myself in the morning because I'm particularly bad in the morning, or you know, whatever. So then I have to create an extra correction to that thing, and then restart the experiment. And you know what happens? This is how good habits form: is you practice it, it fails, you fix it, you practice it, it fails, you fix it, till it becomes bulletproof.
Okay, so let me hear from Monica about this. Go ahead, Monica.
I just want to add one thing on the and you know, it's the rare occasion that John might not make the bed. It's you know, and it's rare. But the thing that I'll just do it because I'm grateful for him. So I think it comes down to like gratitude as well. You know, it used to be that he would never make the bed, but now he makes it 99.9%. So if he doesn't do it, it's not the end of the world. The first thing I think when I wake up in the morning is I'm grateful for my husband. I'm grateful for a roof over our head. I'm grateful for healthy kids. And, you know, those sort of things help fill the gap for the non-ADHD person when things don't go to the plan or the rule, but having an element of gratitude as well.
Yeah, and that also highlights the point. Then we have managed ADHD, because what you're talking about is that's what everyone does. That we don't expect everyone to be 100% reliable all the time. That we want them to be reliable most of the time. So when they're not, then it's not this major drama. It's I'll just do it. It's okay. Because it's it's an unusual thing. So
let's go back to trust, because that's one of the things you mentioned earlier was that Monica probably wasn't going to trust it at first. She might be a little suspicious, but when did you feel that, oh yeah, I can trust that this is going to happen? It wasn't the first time.
Well, it was the habit thing. He got into the habit of doing it, you know, and I knew, you know, the more he did it, you know, the more trustful I was about it. And so it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen every time. We're not after perfectionism. We just have to progress, and you know, hugely progressive.
And I think from my perspective, though, because we created that safety bubble around it, we weren't going to. There wasn't going to be recriminations or judgment.
We never argue about it now.
History.
Never.
Oh God, no. And so I felt safe to be able to talk about it. And as soon as I can talk about something, I can solve it. Because this person here is my conduit. This is the person who I can be me with. So I can I can disclose anything to Monica, and she you know, and I feel safe. So if I can do that, then we can solve it. And then the
reverse is true as well, right, Monica? I mean, you can share anything with him as well, because this is a two-way street. This is not just ADHD.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a partner. Yeah, definitely. Partnership is the term, you know.
Okay, so Monica, how is it for you? I want to hear a little bit more from a non-ADHD person about how this works for you, and how is your bubble, and how safe do you feel in the relationship?
Oh, you know, always, as long as I know we can talk about it. And sometimes it's about choosing that time as well. So, you know, John's got this amazing creative brain. He's a genius, but that's not always the right time. Like I learned a few years ago that I couldn't bring up certain topics just before bed, because his amazing brain would get stuck into it. So it's about understanding how my brain works and how his brain works as well. And we've been married for 32 years now, so 33. Yay! So work in progress, but every day is wonderful, and it's just figuring out the things that might get in the way, and knowing how to have the conversation is important. Wow. Being on the same page.
And I'm sorry, I've got to add there, Monica, you have been repeatedly very kind about my brain, but it's Monica is a genius.
And heart as well. And your heart as well.
And she just works in a more organized way and isn't quite as flashy as me.
Well, I see this as a mutual admiration society between you, the two of you. So, and I hope that is a model for other people who are watching today and are inspired by the two of you and by the work that you do. So let's pull this all together now that we've been going for more than an hour, which you guys, I know that, I'm not saying guys, you all, I know that this is a little longer than most of our sessions, but don't you think it's been worth it? I want you to all nod your head. Yes, it's absolutely been worth it to have you be here with us. So let's pull this all together. Monica, what's the most important takeaway that you want people to hear from your session, from this session?
Well, I think being on the same page, being on the same team. You have to be on the same team. And that means being on the same page. And from a neuroscience perspective, understanding executive function, understanding the brain when it's fueled, the connecting, the knowing, and the doing. But being on and really about being on a team is being grateful to be on that team.
Got it. Perfect.
So gratitude is huge.
Yeah. I love that gratitude piece about waking up and feeling grateful for a lot of things. What about you, Jonathan? What's the lasting message you want to make sure people?
Well, to add on to what Monica said, because I won't repeat that executive function, all that. Yes. But make sure each other is heard, and you genuinely understand and empathize with their experience. And then don't be afraid to create that safe space where we can experiment. And it can just be on one thing. You can still get upset with each other about everything else, but just pull out one thing and fix that thing and see what it feels like to pull together. Because I guarantee you, the reason I can do anything I do in the last 30 odd years is because I've got a partner who makes me feel 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And when we're on the same page, we're indestructible. And that is a basic human function that we need to be with others. And when we're with others and we're supported, we are indestructible. So give each other that space to be heard, to feel safe, and then jump into the breach and experiment together.
What you said, it just reminded me of Victor, because Victor believes in me even when I don't. And that has meant the world. And I know there are a lot of folks with ADHD partners or non-ADHD partners who do not do that. So moving even the smallest inch in that direction is going to be important for you. You can't just automatically have a Monica and Jonathan marriage. That it doesn't happen like that, but it is in increments. And I'm glad that you said one thing at a time, and it can be as tiny and it might not be so tiny, but making the bed can be a tiny thing, but it could be the biggest thing that's making you ticked off at each other. So starting small and making sure that you can work through this once, then you can do it again and again. Does that sound right? That's the rinse and repeat.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. It has just been such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for your expertise, for your personal experience, and for your enthusiasm about helping couples through this. Because what I'm hearing is that you have a lot of happy couples in Australia and probably all over the world.
It's been a privilege speaking with you, Linda, too. Your work is so incredible.
Absolutely.
Everything you do.
Thank you.
We walk in your footsteps, Linda. So
no, let's not go there. Oh, no. I won't take any of that. But I will tell you, though, that you can listen to this again and again. Please, it's worth the extra hour that you spend. If you watched it by yourself, please invite your partner in. This work is so important, and it really might be important to have in your permanent library. I know ADHD folks say, "Oh, I got the recording," but we never listen to it again. This one you need to listen to again, right? You need this information, and tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to get in touch and learn more about your work.
Over to you, John.
Okay, so our website is connectadhd.com. So spelt all normal way.
Yes.
And we have a whole, all about us on there, how we work, our programs. We coach via Zoom, like I said, all over the world.
Yeah.
And our email is info@connectadhd.com.
Perfect.
And that's probably the easiest way to find us.
All right, perfect. That sounds fabulous. I will see you guys. I'm already booking you for next year, just so you know.
Cool.
So they're going to commitment. And don't forget, you can join us live on Sunday. I just don't want to forget to remind you of that. But in the meantime, there's so much more in the Palooza. So stay with us. Mwah. Take care, and bye, Jonathan and Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've done it. Finished another ADHD Couples Palooza session. Now it's time to put some of those good ideas into action. But not all at once, please. Take it slow so neither one of you gets overwhelmed. The ADHD Couples Palooza is brought to you by the AD Diva Network at addiva.net. With deep gratitude to all our Palooza experts and to you, the ADHD couples who are determined to take their relationships to the next level. Hey, relax. You've got this.